Hello, designers, and welcome back to the final part of our four-part series on layout and typesetting in Adobe InDesign. We'll be doing our fine-tuning, the last step of the process for typesetting. Remember that good typesetting requires visual contrast for hierarchy and smooth texture all the way throughout, so things look nice, soft, even and organic. First, we are going to go back into InDesign and adjust our rags, and then I will show you all my process for justifying type. A couple things I did since I saw you last. I buttoned up my quotes a little bit with a little ragging and a little bit of tracking. And what I decided was my body copy was too big. I started looking at a few of the rags and I was just a little too big. So I went down to 10 point type, fully acceptable. That looks pretty good on here as far as weight and balance. Looking overall at the thing. If I zoom way out, you can see that texture that I was talking about. This is nice and even, fairly consistent. The edges on my rags look nice. The denser copy is over here. There's actually two lists in the middle of this section over here on the right hand side, and that's kind of throwing off my rags a little bit. But over here on the left, I look pretty good. Um, and what you're looking for is as if you tore a piece of paper and you had that nice wavy short, long, or long, short variance on your line ends. The last thing we can do before we get started is actually check character count for a line. And there are guidelines for character count. So I have one of my longest lines highlighted here. The longest line might actually be this one right here, including spaces by character count. 50 to 70 is optimal. We're in fairly dense content. You could argue that I'm too small because I have a character count of 80 here. I would definitely say that's about the upper end of it. Since we're in a little smaller size for the body copy scale, I would say 80 characters is acceptable. The optimal or perfect line length by character count is generally considered to be 67 or 69. I can never remember which characters. I'm 10 above that, and considering the weight, texture, Helvetica sets a little big for point size, so I'm kind of accounting for those things. So keep in mind, body copy 10 to 12 is acceptable. I find 12 to be too big. My guideline is 10 to 11 is your general rule. Line spacing is probably 2 points above that. I opened mine up just a little more. I'm actually sent 10 body size and then 12.15 for line spacing. This looks good. It's a little more open than I would usually do, but it's very comfortable for reading. And then check your line length. Margin to margin is never the answer. Unless you're doing an academic document in MLA or Chicago or APA style, margin is never the answer. Check your line length. 50 to 70 characters is generally what's considered acceptable for as long as a person can read before their eyes starts to wander and track somewhere else. It's comfortable for those returns. 67 to 69 is considered optimal for character count. That includes spaces. Uh, for my use here, again, since Helvetica set's a little big, I'd say 80 characters is fine for what I'm doing. All right, fine tuning. Let me go back to being able to see my hidden characters. You can see that I cleaned everything up. I upped the point size on my subtitles, and I also put in some extra spacing before to help break out these sections and attach the title to its next section rather than the section that we just came out of. All right, so for rags, what I'm seeing here, this is already pretty good, which is what tells me my point size is correct and why I made that small half point adjustment to take my point size down. If you're trying to rag text and you find that you're constantly fighting to get the lines to fall where you want them for a nice short, long, long, short rag, your point size is probably off. Generally, it's too big, is what I find. Occasionally, it can be too small, and character count would point that out. Since I'm locked into my layout with my text frame, my adjustment was to adjust the point size to get the line length right, and also to get my rags to fall where I feel they are reasonable for me to deal with, to get them fine-tuned the way that I actually want them. So my first line here, I got a long, short, long, and then the end of a paragraph. This is good. That looks good. Next paragraph, I'm starting long, and then I have a medium, and then I have a short, and then I have a long, and then I have an end here that for some reason has an extra strange amount of spacing in between there. I'm not going to fight that battle just because this is going to get a little long by the time I go through Justified at the very end. Um, so, my call on this is actually going to be just to take this line out with the tracking to +10 and call that good. When you're adjusting rags, you do it with tracking, and you absolutely want to stay within the tens. So for this paragraph, now I'm going to have long, short, long, and I want this one to be short, so I'm going to make it -10. Notice how convenient it is to have the properties panel open when you're ragging. Now, what just happened when I adjust that tracking was it pulled this to preposition to to back up onto this line where I didn't want it. I actually want that edge. So I'm going to insert my cursor. I'm going to backspace to remove that extra hard space. And then I'm going to put in a soft return for a line break. A soft return is Shift Enter on the keyboard. And if I pop out of this box for a minute and hit W, now I've got a nice long, short rag going on here. So on down to my next paragraph. This is long and reasonably short, and then long and then short. I think my move here is to actually see if I can pull this impact up to this line by hitting -10. That happened, worked out nicely. Now I need this guy longer, so I'm going to go up to 10. And then again, don't know what it is with the twos, but bye-bye, Mr. 2. Uh, excuse me. Now I have that in where I want it, and I've got a really decent, soft, organic looking rag happening here. I'll do one more paragraph. Certainly, you want to try to rag where a line should naturally split or where you would pause if you were reading something. So, a comma with a conjunction after it is a natural call to go ahead and drop that and down to the next line. And really on this here, if it wasn't for this see you in September poking out, I really wouldn't have issue with that line at all. So I'm going to take that down to -10 and call that good. And I did that without my characters on bad Adam. So to me, that's reasonable. This whole layout, honestly, this would take another round of revision and fine tuning on my part. I certainly could do better with these alignments up here. Maybe this actually should be aligned a little a little more directly with this quote, pull everything together. That might indicate that what I actually want to do is just get off my margin altogether and pull that down here somewhere. I probably wouldn't be okay with that. And what I might end up doing is readjusting where some of this other stuff falls based on the spacing. Um, I might actually pull I might actually pull all of this up to the margin then, and then grab these two big dialog boxes and come up to a reasonable place on my grid, which would be right here. That small adjustment there does me some good. Another thing I want to show you before I jump into justified text really quickly is that right here, what I have happening actually, let me go ahead and zoom in here, is a list. See the numbers. So what I'm going to want to do is number one, that break isn't supposed to be there, and neither is this break. So I'm just highlighting those hard returns, those paragraph breaks, and pulling those out. And what I actually want is one paragraph that is just my list isolated here. So I'm going to make at the end of number one here this hard return a soft return, looks like the capital L on its side. That helps by spacing call out this list. And then my next move, since now I'm inside of a single paragraph, that allows me to go into my paragraph tab and adjust my indent so I can call it out even further. And then the next move that I want to do, and this isn't going to work the way I have this set, but I'll fix it, is to indent all of my second lines to here. So the move I just did, I just hit Command, and don't ask me where this is in the menus because I do not know. The keyboard shortcut is Control or if you're on a Windows machine, Control Pipe, but Command Pipe. And the pipe is the straight vertical line that lives above the backslash on your keyboard. And what that will do is you can see there's a little cross, looks like a sword right here now as a character. It indents until the next character break everything to that point. So I do now have to change this to a paragraph break, and then what I'm going to do is just go ahead and adjust back up that extra spacing in between. And maybe I actually do want a little spacing in there, but not quite as much as it's trying to give me. And then I can come down here to my number two, hit Command Pipe again. And now when I zoom out and we look at this and I kick the print preview on, look, my rag fell really nicely. My list is called out correctly with an extra indent for the subsequent lines. It's demarcated away from the regular text very well. Obviously, I would do the same moves down here. I can just put a command pipe right here if that was actually set to paragraph breaks the way it's supposed to be. There it was. There it went. And then I would finish formatting this in. I want to stop there for fine tuning rags, but what I would like to show you all now is my process for justifying type. Uh, Generally, yes, you do want to go into fully ragged type um, before you try to set justified type. I probably would have stopped short of going through and tracking. And what I'm actually going to do right now is pull out the soft returns for my line breaks. I would be okay from right here, and I know this is the end of my text because here's my pound symbol. I would be okay from right here going into justified. I have my point size correct. I have my line spacing correct. I have my rags reasonable. Reasonable. All right. And I have some weird going on with the line spacing on these last two lines here. But again, I'm not going to fight that battle right now. So this stuff is all set to, actually, I'm going to have to go into my body setting only because I set a subtitle for those lines. And what I want to do is justify my body. So I'm in my body setting, and you can open up your styles panel right there through the properties panel. I'm going to go ahead and double click on my body so I can adjust it. I'm going to make sure that my dialog box is out of the way so that I can see what's happening live over here, because this takes some fine tuning. All right, indents and spacing. Here are the justifies, okay? The way these work, and I'm gonna get out of here for a second, but you have left justify, center justify, right justify, and full justify. The way those work, if we look in the actual paragraph panel, this is the kind of preview of those settings that we just went through. Right here is flush left, rag right. This is center, which is only for invitations and greeting cards. Here we have flush right, rag left. These four are justify. And the indication is, how is the last line handled? 97.8965% of the time, you want that last line left when you're setting justified text. Middle, occasionally, right, not very often. And if you go justify all lines or full justify, what you'll find is when you have a shorter last line, it's going to space out that entire line, the width of the box, and it's going to be completely unreasonable. Okay, back to my body style, back to where I was getting ready to go into justified text. So indents and spacing. Left justify is going to be justified with last line left. All right. And this, of course, because I had everything dialed in the way it's supposed to be before I started messing with tracking and even thought about going into justified, this actually doesn't look too bad. There's a little extra spacing on this line here, but most of this looks fairly consistent. I'm not seeing any huge rivers where spaces line up from line to line to line. I'm not seeing anything that's really totally super tight crammed together. Now, I am still going to adjust justification to make it work. Needs attention to H's and J's. The H's are your hyphenation. That's where I just went in the list to the hyphenation tab. And the J's are justification. And that's what adjusts the individual word and letter spacing in here. We're going to start with hyphenation. I'm going to turn it back on. This is absolutely counter to how I set flush left, rag right type, but you need hyphens generally to make your justified text work. It needs that little bit of play. Now, I don't want to let InDesign hyphenate just anything it wants. I would consider that words with at least 7 characters or letters are okay to hyphenate, but only after or before 3 characters. I don't want hyphens happening where there's 2 characters, a hyphen, or a big long word, a hyphen, and then 2 characters. I want at least 3 characters each way. My hyphenation zone, I'm not really going to worry about because I have fairly fairly short paragraphs here. So I'm not going to adjust this. Do not adjust this better spacing, fewer hyphen thing. However, uncheck all these boxes. You definitely don't want a hyphen happening across a column. You do not want to hyphenate the last word of the paragraph. That would be an issue because it would also be a widow if you're hyphenating the last word of the paragraph. And you don't want to hyphenate capitalized words. Capitalized words are nouns and very specifically proper names. You do not want to hyphenate proper names because they end up being brand names, organization names, things of that nature. It's actually offensive not to account for that. Okay, this sets my hyphens in a reasonable way for setting justified text. So that's my H's. H's and J's. Now I'm going to adjust the J's. So now that I have my hyphenation in here, what I'm seeing is that this is actually looking a little bit tight to me just from here. It might be okay. I'm not going to be able to look at it without the print preview on until I finish setting. It usually takes me a couple times going back and forth in here to get this justification correct. What I normally put this on to start looking at is word spacing minimum 90, desired 100, of course, and then a max of 107. And we can see already that took care of me feeling like this was a little tight, sort of. Actually, I think I wanted to go the other way. 77. That looks better already. 100 for my letter spacing. It's always -202. That's looking good already. And then the paragraph composer, single line composer, I usually find that single line does better than paragraph composer does. All right, let's take a look at this and see how it looks. This is pretty much what I would consider, yeah, single line for sure. This is pretty much what I would consider your starting point to look at for justified text. I'm going to get out of this box and hit my print preview. I'm backing up from my screen and I'm also going to zoom out. And what I'm seeing is this right through here in this brief paragraph is a little tight, and all of this up here on top is a little open. So I'm going to go back into that body setting, and I did that totally incorrectly. So I'm going to cancel and click off, undo, because I lost my styles. I need to be in one of my body paragraphs, then click on the style. It's my J's that are having an issue. I'm going to go 87 right here, and I'm actually going to up the max to 109. And then now I want to take a look at this. I'm going to hit OK and click off. I'm still in preview so I can see. And now what I'm going to have to do is manually go through and adjust anywhere that I feel it is overly tight. And where I'm seeing that happening for sure is right here on this line. So I'm going to put in a soft return right there. That pretty much took care of that line. What's really making this date painful or making this line painful is that date right there. I would say that now I'm in good shape here. Okay, in good shape, but here's the thing. When you set justified text, you absolutely have to hang your punctuation. So I have one box here, and I am only still working in print preview right now because I'm demoing this. Normally, I would be looking at this way, but I'm going to turn that on for all of you. Hang your punctuation when you justify. That's also going to help your justified settings by getting a little space in there. This stuff is 10-point type, so I'm going to take my alignment down to 10, and you definitely do not want more than that. But you can see now what happened. My period, my hyphens, they are down here out to the side and giving me some very, very nice edges. I actually think for the way this text is, I'm going to make one more adjustment, and it's going to be to my H's. I want 4 characters at the beginning and 3 at the end, at least, and I think that should do it. That might need one more pass, but that certainly is the procedure. I lost my settings there. All right, I hope you found that helpful. Happy typesetting.